Welcome to Breakfast Central. Good morning and welcome to a brand new week. We hope that your weekend was one for the books. Exciting, even though that's not the word to categorize our days, seeing how the price of everything is increasing. But we hope that you found something to at least make you smile over the course of the weekend. For the next 2 hours, we're looking at political stories here in Nigeria. I am Olive Emodi.
And I am Osaogi Ogbawa, welcoming you to Monday morning's edition of Breakfast Central. Remember to be a part of the conversations on our social media platforms. Simply tweet at News Central TV. Let us know where you are and what might be going on in your area this morning, or any of your views on current conversations that we're having on the show this morning. One of the stories that we, of course, have found interesting is the story on the Guardian newspapers this morning that says parents groan as fees and fares spike by over 70% amid dropout concerns. And it's an opportunity to express, the concerns that everybody should have when we hear about petrol price increment and also hear about the Naira exchange rate continuing, of course, to skyrocket. It's not just people who are going to be buying petrol that will be affected. Every single thing will, of course, be affected. The price of goods and services in the market will be affected. School fees, 70% increase in school fees is completely insane for parents who, are struggling to even provide the most basic things for their children. And I don't even know how they're going to cope in this period. So our hearts go out to these parents across Nigeria who have had to, of course, experience this new school fees. Because
I think the reality of it will set in today, because today is the day that students are
back to school.
Returning to school, pupils. Of course, that's going to mean for a number of them, they've had to buy school bags, they've had to buy school shoes, they've had to buy textbooks. Yes. And the prices of what they were at the time that the students were getting off school is not what they are now, because even these manufacturers and these sellers are hit by the current reality of things in Nigeria. So there's an increase across board.
Absolutely.
So my heart just really goes out to parents. It's a really tough time to be a parent right now in Nigeria. I don't know how we can, I don't know if there's any way that we can subsidize this, in terms of, if we had for maybe producing our things here in Nigeria for school bags. There are a lot of parents that still will not buy their children's school bags and school shoes here, maybe because they're worried about that. But for those who are buying from here, I really wish there was a way that we could subsidize it to make life a little bearable for parents. Mm-hmm. Have you seen how much school fees cost for children in daycare? I saw one school fees daycare, they were paying something up to the tune of $1 million. And I said, $1 million for what? To learn ABC?
You don't always, that is for those who can afford private schools. A certain, level of private schools, will charge that much. That's not for everybody, obviously.
So imagine what those ones will be charging today.
Exactly. But, the point is, yes, there will be an increment in school bags and school books and textbooks and all of that. But the schools themselves will have to, of course, offload the new cost of running those schools on the parents. Because the schools, if they realize they're going to be running on diesel or just having a general increment in their running costs, they will have to put that cost on the parents. And so parents will go and receive new emails telling them that the school fees that used to be 400,000 is now 650,000 or 700,000 or 800,000, and that's going to be the new reality for a parent that has 2 or 3 kids that have to go through that whole process. Daddy and mommy have to, double their hustle.
Bear in mind that where daddy and mommy are working, they're probably not even having a salary increment.
No, they're not.
Because they're not, how many organizations, and shout out to the organizations that have been able to implement that, but not a lot of organizations are able to implement the increase because they also are battling with trying to make ends meet in some measure. So it's really it's not a win-win situation for parents in any way, shape or form, because they are not earning as much, their earning capacity has reduced, yet their expenditure has increased. Yeah. So our hearts really go out to parents, and we hope that, this turbulent times will not last for long and that there will be some light at the end of the tunnel. Speaking of light, I must really applaud a number of our distribution companies. I don't know if it's just me because I'm very quick to call them out on air when they are failing, but I think that in the past month or so, they've been really consistent, especially with the fuel scarcity era. Typically, when there's fuel scarcity in Lagos, what you then see is during that period, there isn't power. So whilst you're battling for fuel for your car, you're battling for fuel for your gen, and you're not able to, strike a balance. But because I live within the electricity distribution axis, I've had constant light, and I really want to applaud them for not disappointing us. And I'm hoping that this continues, and that Nigerians are not thankful for things that should be the norm. But because we're quick to call them out, I think it's also important to say well done, you know, when they do a good job. So, yeah.
I have no applause for them because what you might be experiencing is band A. There's people who are going to be on band B and band C who do not have the same experience.
Well,
what you're experiencing is paying 225
no, I
naira
don't pay
per
that much.
kilowatt
I'm not band A,
I'm not
which
sure,
is why it was weird to me.
The point is, I don't applaud
You
them.
are band A.
When we get to, it's not because of how much it costs me. I don't mind how much it costs me. I just want Nigeria to have the reality of constant power supply.
I do.
And the fact that, you know, we've suddenly seen them improve and power supply it's not worthy of an applause. We still are on 3,000 or 4,000 megawatts, 3,000 megawatts of electricity. So it's not like there's anything different that has changed. They probably just have adjusted on the operational processes.
So if they have adjusted on the operational processes and it's getting better, it's like, okay, well done, you can do better, keep pushing. Because for the
You can applaud, I would.
Not just me, I've seen many people on social media sharing that, oh, is there a problem? Why am I having constant light? I've had constant light for the past 1 week and I'm afraid. So I thought, okay, by the time I started to see tweets like that, I realized it wasn't just personal. But then again,
that's not for me.
The distribution companies are not part of our conversation this morning. Let's share with you what our top stories are before we bring you breakfast headlines. Dangote free to fix price, but not lower price promise, says NNPCL. Dangote has been in the news for a while, and we'll talk more about that. Atiku slams federal government's move to hike VAT amid economic crisis. There are plans to move it up from 7.5 to 10%. Sokoto residents bemoan scourge of banditry. Now, away from that, we also look at the army refuting mass resignation claims, upholds right to resign. This was a big story over the weekend. We reviewed the newspaper front pages. We opened the phone lines for you to join us as well. But now, let's bring you breakfast headlines.
Now let's begin breakfast headlines in Niger State, north-central Nigeria, where a petrol tanker explosion claimed the lives of over 30 people. The accident occurred on Sunday along the Lapai-Agaie road, approximately 2 kilometers from Dendo community in Agaie local government area. According to the Niger State Emergency Management Agency, the petrol tanker collided head-on with a trailer truck carrying travelers and cattle from Udil in Kano State. Also in the news, now to political matters, the People's Democratic Party, PDP's National Disciplinary Committee, has received reports from the National Working Committee regarding alleged anti-party activities involving the Minister of the Federal Capital Territory, Nyesom Wike, and others. Wike, who is a former governor of Rivers State, and several others have been summoned to appear before the panel following multiple petitions accusing them of anti-party activities and sabotage during the 2023 elections. The allegations include claims that Wike and 3 other former PDP governors, Ifeanyi Ugwuanyi of Enugu State, Samuel Otom in Benue State, and Okezie Ikpeazu in Abia State, as well as the present Oyo State Governor, Seyi Makinde, worked against the party and its presidential candidate, Atiku Abubakar. In East Africa, a member of the Tanzanian opposition party, Ali Mohamed Kibao, has been found dead after being abducted, beaten, and doused with acid. Chadema party leader Freeman Mbowe, who confirmed the incident, disclosed that Kibao was forced off a bus at gunpoint on Friday, and his body was discovered in Dar es Salaam on Saturday night. We now head to the north of the continent, where Sudan's government has rejected a call by UN experts to deploy an independent force to protect civilians affected by the ongoing conflict. The conflict, which began in April last year, has killed tens of thousands and displaced millions. UN experts have uncovered harrowing violations by both sides, including potential war crimes and crimes against humanity. Now, Algeria's incumbent president, Abdelmadjid Tebboune, has been re-elected with almost 95% of the vote. Tebboune, 78, was heavily favored to secure a second term in the race against moderate Islamist Abdellahi Hassani, a 57-year-old, and socialist candidate Youssef Aouchiche, a 41-year-old. Also in the news, flash floods in southern Morocco have caused widespread devastation, with multiple homes destroyed and many reported missing. In Tata, 12 people are missing after floods swept through the area, collapsing at least 7 houses. Meanwhile, Dua Smogen, 12 people are missing due to floods, and in Tiznit, 2 people have died and 2 others rescued. That's all on Breakfast Headlines. Let's move now back to Breakfast Central and get into our top stories. I am Osaogie Ogbonwan.
Residents of Sokoto State have called on the federal government to do more in ending the activities of bandits which have continued to pose a danger to their lives and livelihoods. They say that despite the current economic situation in the country, bandit activities have increased their hardship and need to be curbed. News Central's Emmanuel Bagudu reports.
It's Sunday afternoon in Sokoto town, also referred to as the seat of the caliphate. Though citizens are seen going about their normal businesses, many of them carry the pain brought by the rise in bandit activities. They say the effects of banditry and terrorism are compounding the calls by the government for citizens to bear the current harsh economy.
I'm here in Tohon Kasua in Sokoto city center where I'm interacting with traders, and a lot of them are raising issues of high price of petrol, insecurity that has made prices of food to increase. I'm here one of the chairman. Assalamu alaikum balo.
Alaikum assalam.
Ya aiki ya kasuwa.
Kasuwa mun gode Allah.
Ka ya kyau ba. To gashi nan kana sadda doya ya harkan kasuwan ne ya take ne akan farashi da sauransu.
To kasuwa kan sai dai mu ce inna lillahi wa inna ilaihi raji'un, babu dadi wallahi. Dan sai mu je mu sauko kuɗi mu ba mu gani mu sayar. Gobe sai mu koma kuma mu je mu sauko kuma ba mu gani kuɗi mu sayar. Illa dai dole ne kasuwanci ya zama babu inda zaka sa kanka. Dan Najeriya yau bai san inda zai sai kai ne ba cikin wannan matsala. Kasuwancin babu daɗi. Sai dai ai ta yi haka dan baka san abin da zaka yi ba. Ka sau da tsada in ka je kuma nan ba a sai da tsada.
Kamar wannan doyen guda ɗaya haka da kake da guda ɗaya haka.
Yanzu ka gane shi wannan in na je kasuwa zan sawo shi 2,500. In na je ni ce 2,700 ba za a siye ba. To yanzu akwai sashin da baka zuwa can kai noma. Don da kaji ana kama ka a kashe ko a ce sai ka kama ka a ce sai ka kawo miliyan 10 ina ka gane su. To ina kira ga gwamnati gaskiya a samar da tsaro don shi an mahita. In ya zan talaka ko ba a bashi komai an ka bari ya je daji ya yi noma ya samu abinci to komai an bashi. Mu magana tsaro babu gwamnati da gwamnati ce ta ba mu wasu kuɗi wanda mu a kawo da tsaro.
Ma'aikatan da aka kawo ga hanya babu su. Saboda mi su ma ba samu wani abu suka ba, suna can suna bi dan wani abu su ma wannan za su kai ma ɗayan su. Yanzu Allah ɗaya san gidan da ana sati guda ba a abinci ba.
Gaskiya matsalar tsaro ta wuce duk tunanin dan adam. Abun ya kai inna lillahi wa inna ilaihi raji'una. Yanzu in ka je nan dange shuni da rana mun san inda barayi suke, lani na sai inda suke da ɗiyansu da matansu ana ganin su. Kuma ba ko bindigogi gare su na kwale ba duk yake rugana. Suna zuwa da mangariba ta suna ɗauke mutane nan ƙauyukan da gashuni da kaje da gashuni kaje da aka ce mata bagi. Akwai matsalar tsaro wallahi, akwai barayi wallahi zagaye da jihar Sokoto, ƙananan hukumomi suna cikin haɗari, ba a iya noma, ba a iya kiwo, suna kwashe dukiyar mutane, suna ƙona abincin mutane.
Gaskiya game da wanga kashe-kashen da ake yi ba mu jin daɗi, ran muna ɓaci. Mun rasa laihin komi na rashin laihin gwamnati na ko laihin mu talakawa.
One of the residents, also known as Rambo, a popular youth leader residing around the Sultan's palace, told News Central Television that the youths in Sokoto are willing to join the war against banditry. He, however, says that it is on the condition that the families are taken care of in the case they lose their lives.
Ni iri na talaka yanzu in ni kokari ni kunduku share ya nittare yan ta'adda an kashe ni. Yanzu iyali na za a basu gaban zane. To kaga yanzu wani bai komai haka nan. Amma yanzu ni iri na a ce yanzu na tari yan ta'adda sun taho na tare su an yi bala'i an kashe ni. Kilan hukuma ta ɗo nauyin iyali na. Kaga wani zai komai haka nan.
Despite the security challenges, the citizens of Sokoto State are going about their normal businesses. This implies that they are willing and ready to give government their full cooperation to end insecurity in not just Sokoto, but the entire northwest region of the country. In Sokoto State, for News Central, I am Emmanuel Bagudu.
Thank you, Emmanuel, for that report. Now, let's move on to talk about the Dangote Refinery, as it may export its petrol due to the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited's refusal to be the sole buyer of its product. The NNPC, in a press release, stated that it would only buy Dangote fuel if it was cheaper than the international market price. The Dangote Group had expected the NNPC to roll out its product, but the NNPC declared it would not become the distributor for any entity in a free market environment.
The NNPC also stated that Dangote and other domestic refineries were free to sell directly to any marketer on a willing buyer, willing seller basis. The Independent Petroleum Marketers Association of Nigeria, IPMAN, has offered to buy PMS from Dangote at any price, even if the NNPC refuses to buy. Joining us is energy expert and former chairman of the Independent Petroleum Marketers Association of Nigeria, IPMAN, River State Chapter, Dr. Joseph Ubele. And also joining us is Professor of Energy Law, Yinka Omorugbe, SAN. Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
All right, good morning. Mr. Obele, we'll begin the conversation with you. If you maybe have some measure of clarity as regarding what the pricing for the petrol products will be. We've heard different sides of the story. Initially, we did hear that the NNPC was going to become the sole distributor, the sole customer of Dangote Refinery, at least for Nigeria. But now we're seeing that there's a lot of back and forth regarding that. Do you have some clarity, and what are your thoughts regarding the latest developments?
Okay, basically, all this backward and forward, or the conflict between NNPC, call it the federal government, and Dangote Refinery, is arising from two fears. And these two fears are the fear of monopoly by the government and the fear of practice of price control by Dangote Limited. Now, Dangote has always enjoyed monopoly in any sector they have been operating over the years. And following pedigree, he operates what you call the red ocean strategy, or what you call the game theory. No other competitor survives in any sector where Dangote is operating this red ocean strategy. So the basic fear of NNPC is monopoly by Dangote having that monopoly. And the fear of Dangote is price control. It is practically impossible for any investor to invest his wish son or capital in any sector, and you come over to give him a template for pricing or set price for that investor. And this was the basic reason why Nigerians used 21 years to advocate for a document called the PIA. And the PIA is about 2 years old today, as it was signed by the then President Buhari. Now, the question is, are we really implementing the PIA to its fullness? Because these two fears, like I mentioned, wouldn't have arisen if we are implementing the provisions of the PIA. Because the provisions of the PIA made it so clear that we should be experiencing full deregulation following the PIA. And also, Section 3 of the PIA made it clear that there should be a host community trust fund, call it 3% for the host community, equity fund for the host community. Are we implementing the whole of this? And the answer is no. Because if we are implementing the PIA to its fullness, these two fears could have been eliminated by, that's to say, in a full deregulated economy, there won't be anything called price control. Price control is the opposite of market forces, or where prices are determined by market forces. Ordinarily, any commodity should experience a free market system, not a command market economy or a control market economy like we have it now in Nigeria. I have frowned at the fact where Dangote, in one of his comments, did mention that NNPC will be setting price for Nigeria. That is not part of the provisions of the PIA. And I want to state on this category that setting of price by any man on the high place, on the low side, is contrary to the provisions of the PIA.
All right.
But the PIA stipulates or provides that the oil and gas downstream sector should be fully deregulated. As such, there shouldn't be a pricing template by any person or a command control market economy. It should be open for forces of demand and supply to determine the price of commodities called PMS. But truth be told, at the moment, landing cost of this commodity called PMS is close 1,000 to 1,300 naira per liter, arising from some external variables. So even as government has announced via NNPC Retail Limited that new price template should be about 890 or 880 thereabout, depending on your part location in the country, I want to put to us that there is still a provision of recovery as stated by NNPC. And that recovery, as mentioned by NNPC, stakeholders have said, have described it as payment of further subsidy in disguise. But you know, Mr. President on May 29th last year in his inaugural speech did mention that subsidy is gone. Arising from that, his word should be his bond. So it is not expected that any official of the government will come further to say government is still paying subsidy.
All right, kindly hold on.
I want to understand that what NNPC described as payment of or losses on PMS or importation recovery is further subsidy payment in disguise.
Kindly hold on, Mr. Obili. I want us to bring in Yinka Morogberg, to also share her thoughts on the idea of full deregulation. That's what, we've heard about it so many times, but it seems like the Nigerian government or the NNPC continues to struggle with the regulation. Now there's, bits of confusion here and there, as to whether NNPC would be the sole off-taker of petrol from Dangote or not. There's also, of course, in the news this morning, Dangote is even thinking about selling to the international market, the petrol that Nigerians, of course, should have access to. So help us understand, why the Nigerian government seems to be struggling with full deregulation, as stated in the PIA.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. I think that the problem really has to do with a reluctance or refusal or whatever to not implement the Petroleum Industries Act, as the previous speaker has said, because in the first place, NNPC is not a regulator. So that's why I'm sort of baffled about Dangote talking about prices and prices having to come from NNPC. It never was even the price regulator for the industry at all. Pricing was PPPRA, as we know, in the old time. Right now, matters that have to do with the downstream, that is products, are supposed to be under the authority going by the Petroleum Industry Act. We spent such a long time on this act. The first one was submitted in 2008. We got to 2021, 13 years later, and that was when we now passed the law. Now the problem is implementation. You can't have a commercial arm that is supposed to be regulated by the regulators now being the one that is in charge of price fixing. And for me, it's perplexing as well that a private institution, which definitely knows, will now be talking and insisting on NNPC being the one that calls all the shots. So there are a lot of irregularities in the system right now. So that I think is an issue. If one goes straight into reform, you will see that there are big issues and that the Petroleum Industry Act is not being complied with. As long as it's not being complied with, we're going to have structural defects within the Nigerian petroleum industry, particularly the downstream.
Okay, I'll come back to still talk about the Dangote element and the NNPC element in all of this. But let's talk about the minister. And this is because this has been an ongoing conversation with different guests we've had on the show, taking different stands regarding the position of the president as the Minister of Petroleum. While some do think that he has some answering or some questions to answer, some moves to make, maybe some firing to do, there are others who say that he wasn't officially sworn in as a Minister of Petroleum, even though, yes, all the other ministers were screened by the Senate and sworn in. He was neither screened nor sworn in, even though we know that this did not begin with him. But I'd like to, ask you, Prof, your thoughts regarding the president's role as the Minister of Petroleum, and if you think that he does have questions to answer, or maybe you're also of the opinion that he wasn't properly screened as Minister of Petroleum, and as such, maybe shouldn't be holding that portfolio.
A matter of screening in the first place, because all the portfolios are held by the president. It is the president that now gives out all these different portfolios. So ministers are actually using delegated powers in the same way as commissioners are using the delegated powers from their principal. The only difference is the Attorney General that has constitutional powers. So everybody's powers flow from the president, if we are talking from the federal perspective. But being president is a very hard job. Clearly, he cannot do all the portfolios, so he has to have these different people to help him. Petroleum is particularly difficult, and Nigeria is dependent on petroleum. We're still dependent, I mean, we're probably on like 80-something percent even now, that we should not be dependent on the revenues of the petroleum industry. It's simply too much work. It's hard enough being president. It is a portfolio that the president should have given out. It has been given out in the past several times. We have had substantive ministers of petroleum. Some have been good, some have been colossally bad, but that does not mean that you should not have a substantive minister there actually looking after the interests of the industry. But even when you have such a person, you can't have a minister can go rogue or become renegade. The minister has to be controlled, and that minister's control comes from the national directives, the national policy, and the law. So at the end of the day, we have to make sure there is compliance with the law. But yes, should there be a substantive minister of petroleum? I definitely believe there should be.
Yeah, all right. Let us bring back Joseph Obele into the conversation. One of the biggest concerns that Nigerians have, even if they may not be able to understand what the PIA is saying, they would understand the price of petrol. And that's one of the biggest concerns that Nigerians generally are having, understanding why petrol should be sold at 800 plus, maybe 1,000, 1,300 naira, which is being rumored as well. So can you help us understand, that aspect? What is going to be the likely price of petrol that will be sold by Dangote refineries, regardless of who it is coming from, through the NNPC, through independent marketers? What is going to be the likely price of petrol? And is there any way around getting cheap petrol for Nigerians ever again? Is that still going to be possible? I remember a while ago, I think it was James Faleke that put out a report saying that Nigeria's price of processing crude oil is the highest, or one of the highest in the world, at $48 per barrel, compared to even in Saudi Arabia, where it's about $9 or $10 a barrel. So it just wasn't adding up. So help us understand what is the likely price of petrol, and if it's possible that we will have it cheaper.
Basically, in economics or in marketing, we have what we call 14 determinants of pricing. But as it concerns this pricing of the oil and gas byproduct, call it PMS, let's look at three. One is level of competition. Level of competition should be able to determine pricing. Then the second one should be cost of production. Cost of production also is a factor to determine pricing. And the next is the demand for the product. But it is quite unfortunate that these three I've just mentioned, which are level of competition, cost of production, and demand for the product, the degree of demand for the product, is not among the template for pricing. And somebody will say the defunct PPP ROA, which is a petroleum product pricing regulatory agency that has been scrapped by the PIA. This is the agency actually set aside by the government for pricing template. But since it's not defunct and there is no such agency as such, prices of any commodity to the benefit of consumers should be determined by level of competition. So we are advocating that the recent publication done 7 days ago by NNPC, stating that 18th of September is the last day for calling the call for bidding as it concerns the privatization of the Nigerian own refineries, should be hastened up. That process should be hastened up, because record have it that there is no sector that has been able to combat or to withstand intensive competition by Dangote PSC. So if we want Nigerian citizens or consumers of petroleum products to have the benefit of it or the value for this commodity, it should be that there should be a competition in this sector. Why Dangote will fix its price, the operators of this government-owned refineries now to be private entities will fix their price. And also, remember, we have 2 modular functional refineries in Nigeria as we speak. The Watersmith refinery at Oyo State with a production capacity of 5,000 barrels per day. The Niger Delta modular refinery at Ahoda, Obele community in Ahoda in Rivers State with a production capacity of 2,000 barrels per day. And it is on record that the cost of production at modular refineries cannot be as compared to the cost of production at full-scale refineries. So when Dangote is fixing its price, operators of modular refineries are fixing that price, then the private firms and government and the PIA also provide that when modular refineries operate, while private owns full-scale refineries operate, there should also be a market for importation. And we have it on good record also that imported petroleum products from some countries are cheaper than producing these products here in Nigeria. So we are saying if the PIA is in full implementation, where people are importing from international market, Dangote is fixing its price, motor refineries are fixing a lesser price, I think consumers will have the best of value for exchange of money they will be doing for this commodity called PMS. Until then, I mean, when we are fully implementing the PIA, Nigerians will keep seeing fluctuations up and down as it concerns pricing. And if I told you that landing cost as at last week was close 1,200 naira per liter, meaning that government selling at 890 still have a little degree of subsidy payment in that direction. So Nigerians saying that we should reverse back to 580, 590, I think that seems to be. Also, I join Sarah in calling for the reversal, but I doubt the possibility because this scarcity we've been experiencing for the past 3 months is basically arising from the huge gap between the landing cost and the selling rate in Nigeria. When government was selling about 580 in Nigeria, then the landing cost was close 1,001 per liter. Meaning government was paying about 500 naira for each liter consumed by any citizen of Nigeria. So that burden constitutes what NNPC call a debt of $6.8 billion. And if they keep importing at that rate and keep selling more, I think we'll be seeing more debt accumulate for NNPC. But let me put this to you and put it on record. The next few months, we'll see further increment because I see government gradually driving to full deregulation. But as it concerns Nigeria Labour Congress, what they told us during the last negotiation of the salary of a minimum wage of 70,000, they said government presented to them, I can pay you 250,000 as minimum wage, but allow me to do full subsidy removal to the tune of 1,000 something, or choose. Government gave an option. Choose 70,000 and price will remain as it is, or allow me pay 250,000 and remove subsidy to its fullness, where Nigerians will be buying fuel 1,003, 1,004 per liter. And Labour said, no, leave it as it is, and we'll go for 70,000. So Labour is actually feeling betrayed by the federal government that having accepted minimum wage of 70,000 on the condition, on the foundation that there won't be further increment to fuel price. So I now see the agitation of Labour, but I also join the rest of Nigerians by describing the present leadership.
All right, hold on.
Okay, I mean, just to follow up on what
nothing good will come out of them.
Just to follow up on what you've said, the NLC, you said that the NLC is feeling betrayed, that the government has still gone ahead to do what it has done. There have been several reports. We've seen reports of NLC warning that if we're not careful, Nigerians will buy petrol as high as 5,000 naira per liter. We hope not. But I'd like to also pose the same question to Professor Yinka Omorogbe to talk about, what the projections are for fuel pricing. And the NNPC has said that neither the government nor the NNPC is the one fixing the market prices right now, based off the PIA section 205, I believe. So what are your projections for the coming months, to the end of the year, maybe the next year, for what that Nigerians should prepare for and expect when it comes to the price of petrol?
Okay, well, and say that we should expect greater chaos and worse pricing simply because we are allowing a malfunctioning structure. I have to go back and continually talk about the fact that we have got a law, and that law was there. I mean, the truth is, before the law, it was well known that we had a very ungoverned downstream sector. It was a weak sector. We had grown comfortable about importing fuel, even though we're a major crude oil producer. That was honestly an international embarrassment for us. We have had a constantly malfunctioning downstream. and we have had this subsidization for a long time, but the subsidy has been there to cover even things that should not there. We have not actually dealt with the reasons for the tremendous prices we're paying. I mean, the previous speaker talked about our price being multiples what is being the price for crude oil drilling, exploration and development being multiples what it is in Saudi Arabia. In the same way, we have landing costs that are untenable because there are a lot of things there that really should not be there. The downstream is very, very opaque. So I still go back to talking about who should be in charge of the price. It's supposedly a market thing, but the truth is that we have got an agency that is called the Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority, and this is its business. Its business is to maintain healthy, safe, effective, and efficient midstream and downstream operations in the country. And please note, to promote a competitive market. So we're talking about competitive markets. So where I think Dangote is just too used to being a monopoly and just too used to one take it or leave it pricing sort of behavior, whatever, because I don't quite understand why it's basically talking about price fixing and why it's going to the absolutely wrong agency, wrong organization. It's not supposed to be NNPCL. The authority is the one that is given the full powers and is in fact given the responsibility to ensure supplies of crude oil. So these are really what we have to look at. As long as this doesn't happen, we need to expect continued dysfunctionality.
All right. Prof, maybe hopefully next time when we have you on, would have you discuss, because I remember that you used to be a legal advisor to the NNPC, so maybe next time that we have you on, would have you discuss the possibilities of unbundling or what parts of the NNPC need to be unbundled, for, of course, maybe a better functioning NNPC going forward. But that will be next time.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, Prof, that won't be now. That will be that will be next time.
No problem. No problem.
Joseph Obele, thank you very much for joining us as well. We'll look forward to speaking with you both again.
Thank you for having me.
Okay.
Thank you very much. And now let's take the conversation to another direction. The Nigerian Army has denied allegations of mass resignations among soldiers due to systemic corruption, inadequate welfare, and low morale. In a statement, Director of Army Public Relations, Major General Onyema Nwachukwu, described the claims as misleading and an attempt to cause disaffection in the service.
The Army spokesperson attributed reasons for personnel disengagement to confidential matters, including medical grounds, pursuit of other professions, and community service. He stated that the Nigerian Army prioritizes personnel welfare, citing initiatives such as the affordable housing option for all soldiers scheme and regular payment of allowances. Nwachukwu dismissed claims of widespread resignation due to poor welfare as unfounded and irrational, reaffirming the Army's commitment to personnel welfare and its constitutional responsibilities. Now joining us is Director, Geneva Center for Africa, Security and Strategic Studies, Nigeria, David Otto. Good morning. Thanks for joining us. We seem to be, I think your sound is still muted, so kindly check that you have that sorted out. I want us to start with, the Army has responded. They say there's nothing to worry about. They take their personnel welfare very seriously. They, of course, detailed a few things that they also do for their soldiers. But is this normal to see more than 100 soldiers? Some newspapers have reported up to 1,000 soldiers resign at the same time from any army in the world. Is that a normal occurrence, or should Nigerians be worried?
So thank you. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes,
yes. All right. Thank you very much. Yes.
And if your TV is on, can you please have it maybe muted or the volume reduced so that it doesn't interrupt? But please go ahead.
My TV is not on. So I think, if you can hear me now, that should be fine. Is there any interruptions? Should I go ahead and,
Okay, we're getting a bit of an echo. So it's why we're asking if your TV or maybe your YouTube live stream, because maybe there's an alternative source of audio that is running the show live in the background, because we're struggling a bit with the audio. So,
Okay. I don't think anything is on, but that's fine.
all right.
Yes.
We'll just go
Yeah,
on. Please hold Mr. Otto. We'll go on a very quick break. And by the time we're back, hopefully we'll have resolved the audio issues and then get into the conversation about the Army's resignation. Stay with us.
Welcome once again. And now to get back into the conversation on the resignation of Nigerian Army personnel. Joining us is the Director, Geneva Center for Africa Security and Strategic Studies, Nigeria, David Otto. Good morning once again.
Good morning, and thank you for having me. Good morning.
Right. So let's get straight into it. I initially had asked, if this is normal, if we, every now and then would see hundreds of Army personnel resign from any army in the world, or should Nigerians be worried?
Well, I think, if you look at other militaries around the world, this is a normal occurrence. I mean, in the case of Nigeria, where you see hundreds resigning, I looked at other countries like the United Kingdom, where in 2023, which is last year, the UK Army did a survey and found that almost, I think, about 16,000 military personnel quit the army, as opposed to about 10,000 that were conscripted. Well, not conscripted, but recruited into the army. So the same happens with countries like the United States. The reason why I use these examples, it's simply because the Nigerian army is modeled, around these, two global military powers. So it's not surprising or shocking that you would see this high level of resignations.
But the cases you're speaking about, did they occur at the same time?
Yes, even the UK government described the number of resignations as a result of low morale. They said, that's the Minister of Defense, the Secretary of Defense in the UK, which is equivalent to the Ministry of Defense. He talked about the fact that, more, personnel quit as a result of poor working conditions, troop morale, and of course, this is linked to the welfare. But again, this is not an abnormal occurrence in the military, but internally, often you do not have a one-on-one research on why these military personnel quit. For example, in the case of Nigeria, we don't know. The report did not include, some kind of a research on why the personnel quit. The fact that it was written that it was as a result of high level of corruption, low morale, and welfare was not based on any research. And this is why I believe that the Nigerian Army, spokesperson had made it quite clear that it was kind of spurious and not based on any evidence. But it's always concerning for any military to see a high number of people leaving, because of course you want to retain as many military personnel that you have trained over time. You've spent a lot of money to train, but people always, would have a reason to leave, for personal reasons, for family relations, maybe just as a result of the fact that they don't get enough pay, so it's something that, needs to be really investigated by the Nigerian Army, but it's not abnormal. Again, as I repeated, it happens all over the world.
All right. But I worry about what exactly this means for Nigeria's fight against insecurity, especially as this has been an ongoing war for the longest time. So looking at these mass resignations, yes, they're normal. Yes, they happen in different parts of the world. But what does that mean for us? Before these resignations have occurred, did we have enough personnel to be able to combat insecurity in the country? And what would it look like going forward?
Well, I think, if you look at the numbers, the Nigerian Army has one of the largest, capacity in Africa, almost 230 plus, according to its own records. If you look at that in relation to the population size, over 200 million, then of course, that's not enough. Even the Nigerian Army leadership has said, on several occasions that they need more men. So it's very concerning to see, those numbers resigning, from an internal point of view. I mean, the army will not like to see personnel resigning, and of course, perhaps resigning for reasons of, a low morale, corruption as alleged. So I think it's key that, there has to be some level of internal review, for to look at some of the reasons why, there is a huge exodus, from the military. I mean, with the current insecurity in the Northeast, for example, in the Northwest, across the 6 geopolitical zones, where the military is required to maintain the territorial integrity, peace, and stability, the leadership will be concerned. But what they are effectively saying, the army is not saying that people are not resigning, but what it's saying is that there is no evidence put forward by this report that the reason for resignation by all this personnel is down to low morale and high level of corruption. And I'm not sure that the army is saying that, there is no low morale within the military or there is no corruption within the military. I don't think that's what the military is saying. But they've been very specific that the reason why people have resigned, or this number of military personnel have resigned, there is no evidence that they did so as a result of that. But they will be concerned, of course, because, they need these men, and that's why they recruited them and paid for them to be trained.
Yeah, tell us a little bit more, paint a clearer picture of what the reality might be for these soldiers that, of course, have been facing and fighting insecurity for, more than a decade now. What is the reality of their welfare like? And of course, that includes also availability of weapons and equipment to fight, the insurgency in Nigeria. What do you hear that they have to go through or are dealing with?
Well, I mean, welfare has a number of elements that you can look into. For example, you're talking about the salaries that they get. How much do they get paid? Average non-commissioned officers, would be paid roughly about 90,000 naira. Plus. I mean, when I say plus, I mean including some of the benefits that the military personnel do have. For non-commissioned officers, I think that rises above 120,000 to 1.5 million to the most senior officers. That's just, from a salary point of view. If you compare that to other countries, it's not necessarily the best salary for people that put their lives on the line to protect, man and country. So again, you're experiencing a military that is constantly on the war front, dealing with threats, ranging from insurgencies that have been in the country for over a decade in the Northeast, for example, bandits, in the Northwest part of the country, in the Middle Belt, you have, so the military is constantly, in the case of Nigeria, facing, a high level of threat dynamics. And that requires, a continued review in terms of the state of mind of the military personnel, their welfare. A lot of them get injured. A lot of them are deployed out of the areas where the family members are for a very long time. And, this becomes, a burdensome and, a critical issue when you put it all together. And then sometimes, these aspects, discourage people who may have joined, thinking that the army is a way out. But then, of course, they get into the army and they find out that, the reality on the ground is not the same. You've got to remember that not everyone joins the Nigerian Army or any other military or security agency to serve man and country. Some people see it as a way out of the tough economic situation, and they then join. And once they are in, it becomes, a different ball game, and some of them want to leave. So the army cannot stop someone from retiring voluntarily. Of course, there are procedures, that you need to go through in order for you to, resign or hand over a letter of an intention to do so. So the reality sometimes, can be much different than what is being seen. But the bottom line is that most military in the world, and I mentioned the UK and the US, do suffer from low morale, by some military personnel. They do suffer from welfare issues. I mean, it's very normal. But the question is, what is being done by the leadership to address some of these issues? And this is why the army itself, when it denied these allegations, focused on talking about the fact that, the welfare of the Nigerian army in the past year, I mean, in reference to when the Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Lagbaja was appointed, they talk about the fact that there has been an improvement in welfare, in, the rehabilitation, in housing, just to be quite clear that, of course, they understand the dynamics. They now transport troops, to go on holidays and visit their families. Because, of course, living conditions and family personal relationship has been one of the biggest factors that most men leave the military, because, of course, they can't see their families. They're deployed for 6 months or more. So the reality is quite, different, when you sacrifice yourself, in the interest of national security and maintaining the internal sovereignty of the state, as a military personnel. But it's never an easy job. And I understand and for me, it's not a big deal that people are resigning, but I think the military just has to continue to improve on its welfareism and the living conditions of the soldiers.
Yeah.
All right, let's then talk about what we can learn from other climes. You're in the UK. I mean, you've mentioned, like we started the conversation with you stating that this is something that happens around the world. The Punch has a report in its papers that says that about 1,008 of them have left in the past 4 years. So you said how morale is generally low across the board. But are there things that we can learn from maybe other more developed climes that we can implement here in ensuring that we can boost morale? What are the things that we need to prioritize for our army?
I think in talking about the subject in question, which is why most military, or why do you see a huge number of military personnel leaving the army? I think it's a question of going down to research. And when I say research, I mean the army needs to be quite open and dig deep into why, the reality of the reasons why people are leaving. I mean, the army has always been a very a secretive, agency. They do not want to speak much about the internal dealings within the military, and this is why the spokesperson made a point that people resigning is confidential. But of course, it's confidential. But I think the main thing here is how do you then carry out a proper internal research to find out, just like in the case I mentioned to you in the UK and the US, where when people do resign, there are avenues that the military goes through to really find out, okay, why are they resigning in huge numbers? What is it that we can do more to maintain our military personnel? Because of course, you spend a lot of money to train them, to recruit them, to deploy them, to keep them in the conditions in which they are, as fit as they are. So it's a huge investment for any security agency, talk less of the Nigerian Army, to maintain this huge number of personnel. I think I mentioned earlier on about 230 military personnel, across the country. So when you begin to lose them in that huge number, the question is, what then are they using those skills for? Are they going somewhere else to, join other agencies, or are they using skills for crime? And when I say skills for crime, I'm talking about the fact that, we've seen situations where maybe ex-military or former security agencies have become involved in crime and criminality after leaving, official service. So, the key lesson here is you really need to dig down, into the real reasons, why they are quitting. If it's low morale, as it is alleged, then of course, the army has to continuously improve the morale. If it's corruption, then you've got to work on corruption. So it's simply, what I call step in, step out. You need to understand why people are, doing what they're doing, and you stop them from stepping out of the the military. So it's as simple as that. It
right.
has to be based on data. You just look at the dynamics of why they're leaving, and you do what you need to do to stop them from leaving.
Yeah, all right.
Not stop them.
We probably would just hope that the Nigerian government understands, what some of all these things mean with regards to fight against insurgency and insecurity, because, from recent reports, they're parts of northern Nigeria in Sokoto State and in Zamfara and all the places that are fully under the control of bandits and other terror groups. We don't have enough army personnel to fight this war. It has not been properly funded. And so if we have people who are even leaving and we can't recruit enough to join the army, then we are obviously going to have a bigger security problem in the near future. But thanks a lot for joining us, David Otto. We, of course, would have you join us and have a more extensive conversations surrounding security in the near future. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
All right. Just like I said, it should be worrisome for everyone, looking at what the realities are concerning security in northern Nigeria. Earlier on the show this morning, we had a report by Emmanuel Bagudu, one of our reporters in Sokoto State, detailing what the realities are for farmers over there and, of course, for residents in those, very remote villages. And one of the things that they said was that many people can't go to farms anymore, can't even leave their houses anymore because of bandits, and of course, if you are caught, you might be killed or be asked to pay a ransom. And so these aren't things that we should just ignore. While those things are happening in parts of northern Nigeria, we're hearing that army personnel are resigning. It's not a good look. Anyway, let's take you through a recap of some of the things we've spoken about in the past hour and also share with you what comes up right next.
Let's now review the newspapers this morning on Breakfast Central, and we'd like you to be a part of this. You can react to any of the stories or share your thoughts. The numbers to call are on the TV screen. Remember that when you call, you need to please turn down the volume of your TV set or your device, whatever device you're streaming live from. But let's begin with our first paper this morning. The first paper this morning is the Punch newspaper. Marketers plan petrol import as NNPCL Dangote stocks drag. It's really taking long because remember Dangote had said that they were ready to roll out as soon as the government was ready, and if they could conclude in 48 hours, they were as good as ready to roll out. Petrol dealers meet Dangote over pricing, uncertainty over NNPC's September 15 PMS lifting, which was the initial deadline by the NNPC. Ipman laments as NNPC delays supply at depot, pump price nears 1,250 naira in state. What's the last price you bought?
868.
Well, I bought 920.
Before the 868, I bought 950.
Oh, okay. Okay. Strike. ASU government panel to meet Wednesdays. Group sues Lagos over $100 million Dangote land deal. 4 billion naira illegal arms. 10 charged with terrorism. Obaseki's ego caused rift with Oshomole, says APC. Group urges Esan people to unite for Ighodalu. Do you think the Esan people are going to agree?
It's left to them. I can't.
48 passengers and 50 cows killed in Niger tanker fire. Oh, that's not a good look. We're seeing the pictures there. Over 1,000 soldiers resigned from army in 4 years, according to a report. And this was what we spoke about earlier. Europe-bound cocaine consignment intercepted in sanitary pads. Wow. Atiku's aide, Labour Party, NNPP differ on merger plan. And that's all on the Punch. Let's head to our next paper.
All right, next paper this morning, The Guardian. It says parents groan as fees and fares spike by over 70% amid dropout concerns. It's what we started the conversations with this morning. Atiku and Hurua flay Tinubu's plan to raise value-added tax, one of devastating consequences. We can also find here Ajayi Edema Chidaida Tiwa over appointment of 344 SSAs and SAs amid economic hardship. Tanker explosion claims 48 lives and 50 cattle in Niger State. You can also find here reverse petrol pump price, Serap and APC chief tell Tinubu Nigerians not enjoying benefits of more allocations to states. Also in The Guardian this morning, POS operators insist on court ruling amid CAC threats. NLC vows to tackle graft, fiscal indiscipline by politicians. And also NAFDAC warns against miracle products of faith-based organizations. That's what we can find on The Guardian this morning.
All right, let's move to the next paper. The next one is The Vanguard. Petrol price hike. Nigerians at breaking point. NLC Atiku warn. NLC insists on reversal, urges citizens to revolt against hike. VAT, fuel price hikes will worsen Nigeria's cost of living crisis, says Atiku. Complete refineries by September or sue contractors, Falana tells federal government. A SERAP calls for reversal of unlawful price hike. That's regarding the fuel. JACPA, Canada student enrollment drops 45% after new study visa cap. NDLEA intercepts consignment of cocaine, opioids, and sanitary pads and hair creams. Oluwafemi Ayo clinches second gold, shatters world record in sports. Congratulations. VAT CIT revenue rises 85% to 6.44 trillion naira. Amid economic challenges, federal government opens new opportunities with LTC license to UTM FLNG. Yaradua matriarch engaged in politics of integrity, Clark tells Atiku. That is, of course, I believe, during the visit to late President Yaradua's mother's house, our family. 100 feared dead in tanker explosion in Niger State, 50 cows burnt. That's all on The Vanguard. Let's look at our last paper.
All right. Daily Trust coming up next. 48 people, 50 cows killed in Niger road accident. Banks colluding with states to bypass fiscal law, says FRC. We spend 30,000 naira daily to feed our 9 new babies, says a father. He needs to be ready for school fees as well. 196 soldiers resigned to proceed on terminal leave on the 1st of November. And also, at least some happy story here. A kidnapped Borno judge regains freedom after 2 months. Death by air pollution more than those of malaria and HIV, says the minister. Final story here says we're owed 30 months allowances. Border security personnel cry out.
I want us to, that story that you skipped. OPay money point users kick as federal government imposes electronic levy. And why I want us to take it is because over the course of the weekend, there was a backlash against one of these banks saying that, you're now charging a 50 naira levy. Because the bank had announced that from the 9th of September, they will then start to charge a 50 naira electronic levy for every transaction that comes into the account from 10,000 naira and above. And then they decided to boycott. They all said they were going to boycott the particular bank. But what they did not realize is not just that bank, it's a new development. So the message that I'm going to read, it says, dear valued customers, please be informed that starting September 9, 2024, a one-time fee of 50 naira will be applied for electronic transfer of 10,000 naira and above paid into your personal or business account in compliance with the Federal Inland Revenue Service regulations, the notice read. Now, the company had clarified that the charges are requirements from the President Bola Tinubu-led government and not a source of revenue for the payment platform. So this is, again, in another way to highlight the ways in Nigerians are being taxed in the current realities. If FIRS now comes and says, for every 10,000 naira you receive, you have to pay 50 naira, per transaction. It's 50 naira. Imagine you have 20 transactions a day. You're a business person. You're selling goods and services or whatever it is. You have 20 to 30 transactions a day. 50 naira on each of these transactions, assuming that they're all above 10,000 naira. By the time it comes together, do you see how much you've lost? How much you have to pay for every transaction? So it's in a way indicative or reflective of the way in which it feels like all of them have been given targets to meet, and everybody is just looking for ways to put in collect extra 15 naira here, extra 2.5% VAT here. So, and the Nigerian people are the ones that have to suffer all of this.
Yeah, like you said, it feels like they've all been given targets, so everybody is looking for more creative ways that they can create a new tax here or there, and impose on citizens. Remember when the cybersecurity levy was a nationwide conversation and everyone kicked against it. But of course, we're having this conversation at the same time that the government is increasing, tax to 10%, VAT, to 10% from 7.5%. So, it feels like there's a new tax drive or a new drive across the country to raise funds, for the federal government.
To increase the tax brackets.
To widen the tax bracket, that's what it should be like. Yeah. I think we have someone joining us from Nasarawa. Good morning, Shoaib.
All right. Good morning. Thanks for calling. Please go ahead.
You see, in the news, every morning you wake up is like a blood pressure news, and the likes of bandits, the likes of hyperinflation, tax, and the likes. And we begin to wonder whether we still have government that is listening to people. Sometimes when you ask for things, it appears they do the reversal part of it. We are all clamoring for petrol to come down, but what we receive is increase in petrol price. Tax in all forms, banks too, charges and the likes. And things are going up high in the market. And what you see like state governor saying they use 1.2 billion to repair boreholes. And some of these things seems like our leaders are not that concerned about. And we begin to pray. And we hope that they will begin to listen to people and return back to good governance so that we can have what we call. You see, some of the policies are even affecting the masses so much. Let me take myself as an example. I'm a federal government pensionable worker. And do you know that the policy of self-funding that the government directed has caused people like us and many of us not to receive salary from January to date? We are not revenue generating agencies, and what the government will throw as policy is that remain self-funding, pensionable workers, and we could not avoid to pay salary up to date. We are still battling with this. In all of this, how do you want people to survive? Sometimes you say that when you push people to the war, they break the war. How do we do this? Nigerian leaders should please come back to their senses, or how will I put it? They should understand that when the suffering is too much, there will be a high level of insecurity, and the country will begin to run like we are in a banana republic. It's high time they should come to the plight of the masses. It's unfortunate. Things are falling apart. Seriously, this is not what we clamor for. May God help us in this country. Look at NNPC. Now we don't
Thank you very much.
They started talking of...
All right, we have to interject at this point. Thank you so much, Shuaib, for calling. We'll continue the conversations, and we do hope to see, better days here. I mean, he started the conversation saying that every time he wakes up in the morning and looks at Nigerian news, there's some measure of high blood pressure, which is a reality that a number of Nigerians are experiencing. Because it just feels like there really isn't much pleasant news to look at. But let's also take a look at the front page of the Guardian newspaper. Back to school, parents groan as fares spike by over 70% amid dropout concerns. We're hoping some parents can maybe call and share their experiences as well. You have to endure this term. Inflation is forcing us to cut back. If you can see the cartoon. Does cutting back include spending less time in school? That's a hilarious cartoon, but it's not hilarious. It's not funny for parents. We started our conversation talking about parents and how hard this season must be for them. Yeah. And, I wonder if there are ways in which, I know that we can say that, there's a government schools, but what is the quality of education that the government schools are offering? I remember speaking to a parent who was finding it hard to make ends meet and send their kid to school. And I said, have you considered the option of taking your child to a government school? And the response I had gotten was that the government schools at the time, I don't know if that's the current reality, that there were nothing to write home about, and that, the person was sharing how the classes are usually overcrowded, and they're worried about the quality of education that the child will get. Because your primary school is the foundation of your education. A number of us can relate to the fact that getting solid primary education helped shape and mold the foundation of, even our spoken, our diction, a number of the things that we learn. So I think that it's very important to, analyze this. Let's take this call from Oyo State. We have Henry. Good morning. Please go ahead with your comment.
I think that it's very important to analyze this.
Go ahead.
Henry, we're struggling with your audio.
All right. While we try to get that, one in, there are fair points that have been made. But remember that Nigeria still has, probably still has the highest number of out-of-school children. And if we are seeing a situation where parents are struggling to pay school fees, the number of out-of-school children is likely to rise, because parents would then, decide that they can no longer afford this, let these kids stay at home, and so the effect of, economic issues like this goes all around. It's not just simply a situation where those who can buy cars, can now afford to, of course, not have to buy petrol more expensive. 900 naira, 1,000 naira, 1,200 naira. That's not just a problem. It's, it's a general problem that affects every single, part of our living.
Does this now maybe bring us back to the conversation about priorities in Nigeria's education sector? Because if we're looking at the number of out-of-school children, which is in millions, well over 13 million children that are out of school, if we're looking at these numbers and we're focusing on limiting their age, the age with which they should go to school, shouldn't the focus now to be on how to, one, improve the quality of government education so that parents who cannot afford private tuition can take advantage of the opportunity of going to the government, education. Two, maybe finding means to subsidize education, even for the private sector, in a way that, we're not kicking, parents don't have to drop out of school, because I personally know a few parents that have opted for homeschooling. One, because they don't trust the quality of the education that they're getting. They're worried about the kind of morals that their kids are receiving from school. So instead they said, you know what, we're going to find a way to balance it at home. One parent will be the one to homeschool, or will hire a homeschool teacher, and one parent overseas while the other parent goes out to make money. But now, even in many homes, single income homes will not be able to make that end meet. So maybe we should then redirect our focus, excuse me, rather than limiting the age by which these kids will get into university or by which they can write WAEC or NECO. We should focus on how to ensure we reduce our out-of-school children, the number of our out-of-school children.
There's someone joining us from Ogun State. Good morning.
Hello?
Yes,
hello, good morning.
Sylvester.
Please go ahead.
Good morning. Please, how did our big grandma we are normally speak in Nigeria here? We're getting us tired. At least it's well of a thing now. But we people, at least we are having it very difficult to survive. Please, you people that is close to us, that is kind of our mouthpiece, are always here for us, because the government is not here for us. It's only the stations that are here for us. Please, you people can talk to them. It's well. It's even more, if they can bring it down, it will solve a lot of problems in Nigeria than even as they are thinking. Because in food, in everything you're doing, fuel impacts almost 100% of it. And I mean what I said. So please, let government bring down this pressure. We have the good, and we are suffering like this. A lot of it, we don't have good. At least we'll be talking about buying fuel 4,000 or even 5,000 per today. That's my statement. I don't want to waste much of the time.
We're struggling a bit with your audio as well.
It's not very clear.
That, it's not really clear.
Yeah.
We're able to pick one or two things from what he said.
Yeah, I want to once again reiterate this story. We just, finished the conversation about the security situation, and of course the army personnel that are resigning, for different reasons that the Nigerian Army has not been very clear on. Of course, they've pointed out bad welfare and some of all of those things. And I feel like it's another opportunity for us to really, question the welfare of Nigerian Army personnel, and look at the budget that's allocated to security every year and wonder why they don't have at least a very decent a state of living for Army personnel. But when we are done with that one, we should also look at how important it is that we boost the quality of life of Army personnel, because if we continue to have soldiers resign, nobody is going to fight the insurgency for us. And we currently have a situation, like I mentioned, where there's parts of Zamfara and parts of Sokoto and other places in northern Nigeria that are in full control of bandits. I read a story on Friday by a guy who was talking about the people of Moriki town in Zamfara State that, have had to convince Bello Tuji, the famous bandits, that he should reduce their ransom from 50 million to 30 million. Not even ransom, actually, he fined the community. Fined them 50 million naira because, the army, had killed some of his cattle. And so he fined the community 50 million naira. So they had begged him to please reduce it to 30 million.
Like how did we get here?
So
we're paying bandits to secure our farmlands. We're paying bandits and going to who really is the government of the day in
those places? It's the bandits.
The bandits. Anyway.
Good morning.
We have Christopher. Good morning, Christopher, calling from Oyo State.
Good morning.
Okay. All right, please go ahead, Christopher.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm Christopher coming from Oyo State. I'm happy with your news this morning. In fact, if I had your advert, I mean your news. You said whether banks are charging the federal government charging the 15 per transactions, 2,000 naira, which is unfair. Okay, if that is so, how would you estimate the agent those people pay, pay to get the charges? I want to know.
Christopher, is your TV on? We're struggling to hear you. I know what you're talking about. You're talking about the 10,000 naira, the 15 naira, levy on every 10,000 naira transaction. But if your television is on, please turn it off or mute it. The audio is interrupted. We can't really hear you. Okay, I'm hoping that Christopher can call back. But yes, that's a valid concern. But yes, you were talking about that's a very hard.
The security challenge.
Wow.
All right.
Anyway, I want us to talk still on the front page of The Guardian. I saw a story that's very interesting. Ajayi Edema chid Ayedatiwa over appointment of 344 SSAs and SAs amid economic hardship. So you see, it is stories like this that make Nigerians not believe the government of the day when they say you need to tighten your seatbelts, things are going to get hard before they get better. Because how is it that 2 months to the elections, you're appointing 344 SSAs? What work are they doing within the next 2 months? Yeah. What impact? What is the justification for appointing I want to hope that this is some sort of a scam news and that it's sensational news that it really didn't happen, even though the reports have it that he made the appointment on Friday. But in 2 months, the numbers, first of all, I have a huge problem with the numbers, 344, and then 2 months to the elections. It's looking political. So again, appointing 344 SSAs and SAs is the reason why Nigerians will never believe when politicians say that there isn't money and that we have to cut our spending, we have to tighten and fasten our seatbelts, that things will get bad before they'll get better. Because why is it bad for the masses and never bad for those in the office? Why is it never bad for the government? And I think that the people of Oyo State, they have a lot of questions that the government needs to answer. Yeah. And I'm hoping that they remember all of this when they go to the polls, at the elections. I do want to wait for some clarity. The PDP has criticized the government of the day. They've said that this is not, they think that this is done to manipulate the numbers at the polls, because when they have more people, these more people can fight for their interest and maybe manipulate more other people at the polls. And they said appointing 344 aides will not help you get into office. But I know that this is a question that needs answering. Who are these people? Why is the appointment now? And where's the funding for these aids?
There's always funding. I think, to a large extent, some of all these things are, I don't want to call them poverty alleviation, but, they are a way to also settle a lot of political favors, basically, for people who work for the government to get into office, those who have, their cousins and their brothers and all of that, that need employment. So, of course, that's what the government uses to settle them. Good morning. I think it's someone coming from Oyo State. Oh, okay, good father. Good morning. Welcome.
Hello.
Morning.
Hello, good
welcome.
Morning.
Go ahead.
Please go ahead.
I am the good father coming from Abeokuta, Oyo State. Can you hear me loud and clear?
Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Yes, my sister, my brother, I don't know whether you were on this planet Earth in the 80s or the late 70s. When the military were on, the military would dish out harsh policies. We had labor. We had civil society groups. Students, they took on this military regime. And they were successful. So this time around, why is it that Tinubu keep dishing out harsh policies on Nigeria and there are no pressure groups? taking him on. I am suspecting that this man, there's a spell over Nigerians not to do anything. I mean, my sister Olive, what do you think about all these things? Everything being thrown at the masses, and we just keep. I heard when you were saying you bought fuel 900 and something. So I bought yesterday 850. Is that the best thing to do? Is that the best thing to go right now? So I want the pressure groups in Nigeria to ask this man. The suffering is too much. The suffering is too much. So something must be done. Tinubu is not the owner of Nigeria. Let him do his bit and leave all the others for other president to come and do. You cannot do everything for the country. Like you are saying, what you are doing is good for the country. You want the best for the country. The best is not good for all Nigerians. We are all suffering, grappling and crying.
Thank you very much for calling. And yes, very, very solid points that were made there. Talking about how it's really not good. You can't be saying that you're making policies and the policies are good for the country and the people do not feel like their needs are being catered to. The people are seeing the direct opposite. It just feels like the past 1 year has been we've been in a chokehold, Nigerians really haven't been able to breathe. So if you're making policies and the policies are not translating in the way that you intended them to translate, maybe it's time to go back to the drawing board and see how you can do things differently. Because like they say, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a change.
Yeah, and nobody really has pointed out any metrics or any signs that things will improve or things are getting better for the average Nigerian in the next couple of months.
Before we look at things will improve, like so far, what is the advantage of some of these policies that have been made? How have they really improve the quality of life of Nigerians? If you are doing something that is really good, but for now it's not working, it's not helping, rather it's making life worse consistently, shouldn't it be an opportunity for one to then go back and say, let's try something else? We can do this maybe in bits, or we can do it much later. By that time, we'll have given people adequate time to prepare for the impact, right?
And also, hearts and condolences go to the people of Niger State who lost about 100 people, according to the Vanguard, 100 feared dead in a tanker explosion in Niger State, with 50 cows burnt as well. So, of course, condolences to those people who are affected by that very, very sad disaster. We, of course, have come to the end of the newspaper review this morning. Thanks to those who called and contributed to the conversation this morning. Stay with us. We have a bit more coming your way before, of course, we end the show this morning. Stay with us. Ladies and gentlemen, today, petrol is selling across Nigeria for an average of 1,000 naira per litre. Value-added tax is climbing to 10%, according to latest news from the government. Inflation is above 30%. The naira is exchanging at 1,650 naira. But one thing is certain, Nigerians will adjust. The Nigerian ability to adjust to pain is mysterious. And that's all we do. We adjust. It's our blessing and our curse. It's the thing that makes us able to thrive in any part of the world and come out on top in comparison to other people around us. But yet, it is our biggest curse. It's the curse that makes us find excuses to understand why we continue to suffer, no matter how bad it is. That curse will make you adjust and never actually demand an end to your suffering. If the great Fela Kuti was alive today, he would have made another suffering and smiling song, if you remember. A remix will be due in 2024. Now, those elected into office are not bothered because you are Nigerian and you will adjust. Those elected into government will continue to gather so much so they never get to feel your pain. They will stay in government and fund a life of dreams for their families, send their children to school abroad, buy houses abroad, even buy new citizenships for themselves in choice countries around the world. But you, the average Nigerian, who stood in the rain and sun to vote these people into office, you will adjust. Yes, you will. Your earnings will remain the same year after year and tenure after tenure. Your salary and your earnings will remain the same or even lose value to inflation. But the Nigerian in you will adjust. Some will even have time to be tribal bigots while they adjust. You will have time and mental space to know who is Yoruba and who is Igbo and who is Fulani and who is from Abakaliki. But the Nigerian spirit in you will never actually say enough is enough. Instead, you will adjust. There's nothing like being pushed to the wall for the average Nigerian. The average Nigerian will move from eating 3 meals a day to eating twice and to even eating once a day if you're fortunate enough. And the average Nigerian will convince himself that they don't even need to eat that much because you are busy. Yes, you will adjust. And a few months later, you will be pushed again to the wall with new taxes. The wall in Nigerian context is elastic, so you never really fight back because there's always space for you to make adjustments to more suffering. There's space. In the last few weeks, there have been stories of dozens murdered or kidnapped in Sokoto and Zamfara State. Those lives are not less important than the lives in other parts of Nigeria. And we all know that our government is failing in its most important task, the security of lives and property. Businesses are failing. Nigerians can't afford food or transportation. But as our fellow Nigerians mourn their loved ones in Sokoto and Zamfara and some of all those states, and as Nigerians are introduced to new taxes and the most expensive petrol in our history, once again, we will adjust and adjust and adjust because that's all we do and is what we are good at. Good morning, Nigerians.
Former Vice President of Nigeria, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, has strongly criticized the proposed increase of the value-added tax VAT rate from 7.5% to 10%, warning that this move will be a blazing inferno that will further destabilize Nigeria's fragile economy. He also criticized the government's recent policies, including the duty-free importation of agricultural commodities, which he believes will undermine local farmers and threaten food security. This follows recent disclosures by the chairman of the Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms, Taiwo Oyedele, whose committee has recommended an upward review of the value-added tax from the present 7.5% to 10% by 2025.
Now, this committee also advised the federal government to remove taxes on food, public transportation, house rents, and other necessities critical to Nigerians' well-being. Atiku urged the Tinubu administration to rethink its economic strategies, cautioning that the VAT hike and other regressive measures will only fuel further unrest in the country.
I mean, these have garnered a lot of reactions. The Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms has made several recommendations. Now, the following recommendations are: 1, increase the value-added tax VAT rate from 7.5% to 10% starting from 2025. 2, reduction in personal income tax for individuals earning from 1.5 million naira or less per month. 3, reduction in company income tax rates by 30% over the next 2 years, from 30% to 25%. 4, consolidation of multiple taxes, that is inclusive of IT levy, education tax, etc., into a single tax initially set at 4% and later reduced to 2% in the next few years. 5, removal of taxes on essential items critical to Nigerians' well-being, including food, public transportation, house rents, and other necessities. The committee has advised the federal government to implement these recommendations to transform the country's revenue profile, to reduce the tax burden on individuals and companies, to simplify the tax system and protect the welfare of Nigerian citizens by exempting essential items from the taxation. The draft tax law will be submitted to the National Assembly for approval. Now, there are many, angles to look at regarding this conversation, looking at the fact that the profile of the country, the tax profile is, according to, what has been said, is low. But this administration, a number of Nigerians, I think the sentiment that Nigerians have expressed is feeling like every other day there's one new tax or the other. I'm not a tax expert, and we're going to have a tax expert join us to further expand this conversation on the show tomorrow, which on the one hand looks like thorough bad news because things are hard. Why are you increasing VAT from 7.5 to 10%? When you look at the other recommendations, I don't know. There might be some measure of sense to this because they're saying they're consolidating all the taxes. What would this then mean? Is there going to be a reduction in housing? Here, for example, in Lagos, we know how ridiculously expensive it is to rent properties. You're looking at the extra, extra service charges and all the other charges. I don't know if that's going to maybe bring about a reduction in the cost of housing, a reduction in public transportation and feeding. So maybe we would have to look at the bigger picture, the complete picture of what this will mean across board.
Yeah. I mean, it's a thing that we would have an expert join us, and speak about. Reduction in company income tax by 30% over the next 2 years, looks like
and
something.
And even this number 4, when you see, they say that they consolidate the multiple taxes into a single tax, initially at 4% and later at 2%. So how long is initially going to last for? I think it needs to be a bit clearer, because you can say later and run the same 4% for the next 4 years.
Yes.
So what does that really mean?
So the point is, it doesn't look like, it's all bad, from their recommendations and from the meeting that they had, and it's the thing that we will once again explore. I think we can, quickly just wrap up for today. It's been a very interesting morning. And of course, we completely enjoy the conversations that we had. Thank you so much. For those who called and were part of our conversations this morning, we completely appreciate it.
Absolutely. Tomorrow we'll be bringing what Nigerians are saying, and to engage with us, you can tweet on any of the conversations that are, top of mind, talking about school fees, talking about Oyo State government and the appointment of 344 SAs and SSAs. You can tweet at News Central TV, or you tweet at us directly at Olive Emodi and at Osarage Ogbonwa. We'll be back again tomorrow with another packed show. But now let's share with you what's happening later today on News Central. Now, just to remind you, we have Jasiri at 10 a.m. but immediately after the show we have the news, and there are several other interesting shows, so please do not tune out. If you need to leave your house, you can live stream via YouTube or X at News Central. I am Olive Emodi, and I'll see you tomorrow.
And I am Osaogie Ogbonwa. See you tomorrow.